Welcome to my first reading blog. Vlog, I guess they call them. Um, yes, so I know that I don't always do all the things that one is used to seeing on BookTube with hauls and all that, but I'm going to do a vlog this time because I'm in a reading group for the season of migration to the north, and I may not finish in time for the end of the month, which is a week away, and I'm about to. They're closing. Anyway, I'm off for a week off, so I won't be in the office where I've been doing the reading on the office computer, where I have access to the book, which I've been reading online. So, in case I don't get to finish it, I did want to weigh in and give my little uh, tiny sliver of humble contribution to the discussion about this work, because I think I have something maybe worthwhile saying about this whole idea of seasons of migration, which I'll get to in a minute. Now, before I do this, I want to say very clearly how well aware I am that everything I'm going to say that touches on my own experience of my time in Africa, although it was in a Sahelian village, um, like the village in the frame, which is the only. I'm only going to talk about the opening frame part of the book. I'm about halfway through, but I'll just stick to the frame, and then if I do a follow-up video, I'll do the closing frame, and that'll be what I have to say about this book. But well aware that Africa is a huge place with tons of diversity, especially ethnic diversity. On top of which, I was in a place colonized by the French. They were in a place colonized by the British. Very, very different. Um, Maybe somewhat apropos, as I mentioned, because of a few things to do with village life, um, agricultural living, the uh, the Sahara. Um, so they're on the English Sudan side, and I'm on the French Sudan side. So just across. Some of the ethnic groups do travel as far across. Certainly, I would imagine the Tuareg, Tamashek, people of that nature who are transhumants with the camels, and possibly also the Fulani people who range throughout the Sahel with goats and sheep. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the ways in which I'm thinking about this season of migration is to do with them, which is that uh, when at a certain time of the year, we had Fulani people who lived permanently around us where I lived in Mali. However, at a certain time of the year, Fulani who traveled a great deal would come through our area, and the villagers would consign a certain number of their um, livestock to these uh, transhumant, nomadic people, so that they could take them to greener pastures. I mean, nothing's very green in the South, but to where there's more food to feed them. And in a certain season, they come back. That's especially joyous because at the first signs that they're coming towards the village, all the kids come running in. Everybody in the village breaks out colors and whatever little bits of food and whatnot we have, and make a big giant run the animals around the village and make a big festival out of it and drape. You know how they'll drape cloth on people when they're particularly good dancing? They'll drape cloths on maybe some of the mom ewes who had a lot of babies or something like that. And of course, there's always some that are sad because some of their livestock didn't make it. Anyway, so that is a season of migration in a very traditional pre-colonial way. There's also the season of migration that we call, anthropologists, sociologists call rural exodus, which is very much alive today in Africa, and I'm pretty sure would have been alive at the time of this work, which is that many young people are leaving the villages. Now, for the most part, it's expected that they return. So every year in my village, called Kiro, a lot of the youngsters would go. Some would go as far down as Ghana, where they were like the cocoa slaves. If you've seen anything about them, they would do that work. Other kinds of work like that. Whatever they could get. Now, they would, if they had any money at all, they'd take buses. Although I do know one person in my village who walked as far as Nigeria, um, and he walked because he was walking with the cows. But so every year the youth will go away for season time when there's no work to be done, and they're meant to return with the rains for planting and the hard work and all that. But every year there's a certain proportion captivated by city life or whatever else for whatever reason doesn't return to the village, such that the exodus, the rural areas are being depopulated, and of course the cities are growing massively. I mean, we know this phenomena from across the world, right? Well, it was very alive in my experience of Africa at the time, and I'm thinking. Oh, and by the way, what I wanted to tell you, I had this project that I did there called Club Aventure Nature, to an environmental education program to try and bring that same sense of adventure that they feel about the lights, and they've never seen electricity and stuff like that when they go to the city. This might have changed now, although my part of the Sahara is pretty inaccessible. So if it has electricity, it's probably not often. But back then, they didn't have cell phones or anything. So the kids are excited. They go to the city and they see all this, and in some cases, make a little money. And children with money don't always make good choices. Some get into booze or whatever, which in a Muslim context is you're very, not good. So basically, the kids don't call it exodus. Of course, they call it going off in aventure, in adventure. So this club was meant to bring that same sense of adventure to the environment, to the local natural environment, as to the city. Yeah, not that I was any illusions of stopping, rural exodus, or whether it should be stopped. I mean, I can, lament urban environments and certainly pine for, the natural world. However, if I was a kid, knowing my nature, I would have been one of the first ones out of the village. So let me just read you one little bit from the book that I think explains a little bit about. So I can't talk to you about the ethnic group differences because I only know I do know Fulani. I did learn that language, but I don't know any Tamashek. And my main language, Bambara, is in West Africa, so it doesn't go across there. So they're different ethnic people. I can't speak to that at all. Let me give just one little example, I think, of maybe one of the differences of the way British and French colonial areas maybe had a different experience of independence. So when the French were very centralized, of course, when they left, and their few overseas territories that they have now are not actually overseas territories, they're actual provinces of France. They are French. They use euros. So very centralized, which had good and bad effects in places that they colonized. And sometimes they were a bit, miffy when they, about independence. I mean, obviously Algeria, which was their Vietnam, where they fought. Mali, Senegal wasn't like that. They were federated for a couple years at independence, but they would do stupid. They pull up the railroad tracks that they had laid, dumb stuff like that. Petulant. So yeah, that's French style, right? Now the British style was very much more indirect rule. And here's a little quote that I think it sort of explains that well. I believe this is in that interesting scene, middle-ish, where he's talking to that civil servant in the train compartment who remembers Mustafa and is telling him about how he was the black British. They called him the British black boy, disparagingly. And he was very good in English and everything like that, and pretended he couldn't even speak Arabic. So anyway, he's saying something about independence. He's saying about the British, they used to behave like gods. They would employ us, the junior government officials who were natives of the country, to bring in the taxes. The people would grumble and complain to the English commissioner, and naturally it was the English commissioner who was indulgent and showed mercy. And in this way they sowed hatred in the hearts of the people, for us, their kinsmen, and love for the colonizers, the intruders. Mark these words, my son. Has not this country become independent? Have we not become free men in our own country? Be sure, though, that they will direct our affairs from afar. I won't comment on the last part of that statement, but the way that they divided people by putting some people above, in power and above other people in the British colonies, again, could have some very deleterious residual effects. Not that you don't get neo-colonial behaviors amongst, functionaries in West Africa, French West Africa. Certainly you do. But I think perhaps again, I haven't been to anywhere except Ghana, but again, I think in the Anglophone countries, this was, a much worse part of that legacy. So there you go. That's what I wanted to say about how I'm very aware of this difference. But I'm going to try to just comment on a few things about the frame story in the beginning, and maybe I might throw in a couple things that it made me think of from my experience in the village. But bear in mind it could be, very not apropos. So that I wanted to make that very long disclaimer. So obviously, Africans who leave their countries to return, but who go so far as to study, like in Europe, have that much more profound of an adventure, right? What I find interesting in this work is that both the narrator and Mustafa, in different ways, are both somewhat alienated to their own village. The narrator, I think it's more unresolved. Mustafa, I think, is trying, of course his bridges are burnt back in Europe, but he's trying to, in Britain I should say, trying harder to reintegrate the village. It's said that he always went to Friday prayers. He was always ready to give of his labor and his means in glad times and sad. So the villagers seem to appreciate Mustafa. He takes a local wife. He is, a man of means. So there's an expectation, or at least my experience in the village was that if you had means, you were expected to share it, be quite lavish with your generosity, and also because why wouldn't you? Just the way you would in your own family, right? But also, although I don't know, I guess nowadays people have separate accounts in marriages, so maybe they do. Kids, divorced parents. I don't know what the family is supposed to look like in the West anymore. But anyway, it's a big deal still in traditional African society. And this communal labor was also something that I found still happened in the village. So that there would be certain fields that people would put in time to, nobody owned those fields, but they were sort of for, anybody who was unfortunate, indigent, maybe passing through, or someone in the village who, for whatever reason, wasn't able to, didn't have anyone in their extended family or age group to cultivate for them, that they would have food to eat. And even I remember one of these communal events was going through and checking the paths where the nomadic herders would go through, and sort of marked by stones so that they don't, you don't get this eternal conflict between the nomads and the farmers, where the livestock passing through is eating the farmers' fields. And I remember people like going by, depending who they were, if they were more of a herder than a farmer, they would kick the little stone a little few inches this way with their foot. The other would kick it a few inches the other way with their foot. Anyway, that was one of the communal labor events I remember. There was also a time we all went out. We did a communal hunt. The idea was that there would be an animal buried in each of the four corners of the village for protection. I should mention that another way in which my experience might be a little bit germane to theirs is in Islam. Mali is very much an Islamic country, contentiously more so now, I think, or differently so now than when I was there. But there are these, animist, beliefs that are very much also still present in more kind of a layered way, I found, than, let's say, I think the Catholicism in Indian religions in Latin America are often seen as like syncretist. This is a more sort of layered. For instance, in my village, there was a mosque. The mosque was built over a stone. Then it was used to be that the stone, people would do ceremonies there. It was known for if you had lost something or forgotten something, or something had been stolen, the stone would sort of bring it back or reveal the location, whatever. These days, I don't know that anything is necessarily done with the stone, but people come to our mosque. If I ever saw anybody from outside of our village and it wasn't market day, I knew they had probably lost something or, forgotten something, and then they were going to pray in our mosque with the expectation that they would remember or it would be revealed unto them.